Thank you, all of you, for being here. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start off at the end, actually, with Tim, because in a sense, what we've been doing over these monthly events is kind of talking about each era of the Doctor. So we started with William Hartnell in January, we moved to Patrick Troughton, and in a sense, you bridged some of that journey for us, because you actually had worked in the show in the Hartnell and Troughton kind of era, and then moved into the Pertwee era when you actually became a director. I mean, I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit in terms of your experience having worked in the show previously and moving into the Pertwee era, where you kind of say obviously had a very significant role.
Well, I think with they were all very different. Everyone who's Doctor Who following, I think there might be a few here. I mean, Bill is gruff and grumpy and all that, and Pat was a bit more relaxed and a bit more jokey. And Jon came in with something completely fresh. And I loved the unit story that went with it, because it made it more real. And Jon himself, to work with, as Katy will no doubt vouch, was a superb man and a wonderful actor. I mean, you see those close-ups of him there, emitting emotion. Close-ups, real close-ups, BCUs we used to call them, big close-ups. I think he shined. Like, he's my favourite. In case you hadn't realised. But yeah, that was the transformation going from one to the other was amazing, and but I always enjoyed working with Jon.
And obviously working for the BBC, particularly at that time, you weren't talking big budgets particularly, but actually got a lot for your buck in terms of what was shown on screen.
Yeah, I hope what you saw on the screen was actually, you know, a show with money spent on it. Well, I overspent.
It was, in fact, one of the biggest overspends in the show.
You mean we don't have one unit army?
One soldier.
But in just a little bit of self-defence. Dear Barry, you're not here with us, but I actually hadn't realised right till the very end how bad the show was in overspend. I think my PA, a nice, lovely man called John Griffiths, who you saw shot during the sequence, he kept it from me. He wanted the show to be good, and I was prepared to take the rap for that. It's not his fault. It's my fault. But I hope
it's actually the fault. It's the fault of the people who commissioned this ridiculously expensive
yes.
and complicated show. I mean, the scale of it is enormous, isn't it? Prisoners, soldiers, unit soldiers.
Havoc, you know, a hell of a lot of stuntmen I used, and they were real stunts. They weren't falling off the ramparts. They were falling off the ramparts. It was.
I mean, it does absolutely come across, and it stands up incredibly well, doesn't it? When you see it on the big screen for TV, you know, from that length of time ago, I mean, it's very cinematic actually in its kind of scale, and it looks amazing. Terrance, I want to bring you in now. So you, I know, had started the show towards the end of the sort of the Troughton era, and in fact, in Jon's first story too, The Invasion. At what point do you start to write? I mean, so obviously you knew at a certain point that Jon Pertwee would be given the job. I know he wasn't. I think Ron Moody had been often turned down, but Jon Pertwee had it. Did you write the Doctor around him, or was the new Doctor kind of already kind of created in your mind as to what his kind of attributes were going to be and so forth?
The thing about the changes, at the beginning I knew very little about Jon. I mean, I knew more about Tom, because I met him before I wrote his first show. But basically, I mean, once, much later on, I was talking to Bob Holmes, who was writing a story when it wasn't quite sure who was going to play the Doctor. And I said, you know, isn't that tough? And he said, no, the Doctor is always the Doctor. And in fact, that is the case, you see. Later, what the Doctor says and does, how he acts, is not going to change over 11 Doctors very much. When you get the time, and later on, you add the quirks and the idiosyncrasies and the kind of joke or, you know, the line that the actor can do best. But the core of it, the dramatic core of it, is the Doctor is always the Doctor.
And Richard, you obviously joined the show as you're Captain Mike Yates. You're in the unit family, and that's very much a kind of part of the sort of Jon Pertwee era, is that he was sort of based on Earth, banished to Earth, if you like. He wasn't able to use his TARDIS unless he was kind of given a special sort of dispensation to by the Time Lord. So a lot of the action then sort of took place on Earth and with you, so to speak. I wonder if you just tell us a little bit about, first of all, when you were given the role of Mike Yates, whether you knew that it was going to sort of develop along and that you were sort of, were you committed to a certain number of episodes, or was that something that you were just brought in and it just kind of evolved?
I was just brought in and it evolved. I didn't realise that I was never going to have a ride in the TARDIS. I think I'm the only person who ever hasn't been, actually. Oh. But I've seen it at exhibitions and things, so I've I travel at night, you know, in this TARDIS. I was told it was going to be love interest, and that was about it, actually.
Because originally you were brought in to be Joe Grant's love interest.
That's right, yes. There was a little competition there, actually. But in fact, I really owe, you know, sort of my job to Joe, really, because
John wasn't very good at sharing with those situations.
we had I had 3 interviews, and the last one actually was with you.
No, I didn't do it with you.
Didn't you?
No.
Well, who was it then?
No.
It was an awfully nice girl, actually. I had to read with.
No, I didn't ever do anything with him, did
Caroline John.
Caroline John?
Yeah.
Yes, because I never read for it because I couldn't see.
Caroline. Yeah.
I just improvised and they said, oh, she'll do.
Well, it's all right. If it had been Joe, I'd have said yes as well, actually.
And then John in the same way, actually. I mean, obviously, we're saying that you actually sort of had, I think, in fact, you'd already appeared as a couple of, like we were a Cyberman and a Yeti
yes.
before you were Sergeant Benton.
Yes.
So you were already kind of inaugurated the Doctor Who family.
Yeah.
But at what point did you know that your part was going to be a regular part?
Well, the story goes, in fact, it was corrected to me just last week. I thought it was a chap that got sacked for being late 3 days running. And I know that behind my back, Barry Letts and Douglas Camfield had conspired nicely to give me the part of Benton, if I could speak the words. And remember, I had no drama training or anything like that. So, and I must just say, by the way, I'm overwhelmed to the point of tears last week when I read the part of Jon Pertwee and what he said about Katy, myself, and Richard. I didn't realize he loved us that much, and I didn't realize how vitally important we were to his life, as indeed, you know, because we did live that life. I mean, it was an amazing, for me, 7 years to work with these people. It really was a miracle. So the fact that Benton ended up getting the part, having been a good monster, I find quite interesting. But it was just adorable. I've lived my life on it, and I've loved every second of it.
Actually, when you just referred to the interview in it, he talks about the fact that at that time, perhaps you weren't as confident as we know you as being now, and that perhaps he was kind of like a mentor to you in some respects.
Well, you know, one hates to kind of admit it now, and you know, now that I've just turned 50. Yes, I was a mess because I had a lousy marriage at that time. I had a father who hated me, who came back from the war. And I grew up a very lonely, desperate child with very little education because I was sick with a very bad blood disease, which took 3 years out of my life when I was 11. And so the fact that I could speak words and end up as Sergeant Benton in Doctor Who, in my own mind, is a minor miracle. I'm just thrilled, and always have been.
And Katy, John played a part in your selection as well, didn't he? I mean, he had this relationship, obviously, with the first companion, Liz Shaw, who just took to Caroline John, but he actually was involved in the selection for you. Or so he says in the interview. That we
No. Oh, Jon Pertwee.
Yeah, Jon Pertwee. Oh, no, sorry, not John Levene. No, sorry, no. No, sorry, Jon Pertwee.
Too many chances, I'm confused.
Jon Pertwee was involved in the selection.
Absolutely, but it wasn't known until a little bit later because he saw me when I was doing something else at the BBC, and he suggested, I think it was Philip Hinchcliffe back then. Was it Philip Hinchcliffe? And he just happened to say, en passant, I've seen someone I think would make a very good Doctor Who girl. And then when Barry Letts took over, he said, no, I found someone. And it just happened that it was the same person as he saw sitting at the BBC. That was me.
And sometimes, you know, obviously because you're actors, you have to kind of create a part, but there is a very noticeable chemistry between the two of you on screen that I think is completely sort of unmistakable. I mean, it's a real spark, and I mean, it comes across in every story you see.
And it gets stronger, I think. It was day one. We just kind of, you know, it was such a wonderful team to work with Roger Delgado, I mean, who was just so brilliant. And it was just one of those things, we just hit it off as people, and that sort of permeated, I think, very much through.
In terms of the Mind of Evil, obviously one of the most difficult things you have to achieve is this whole kind of especially for the actors, when they're acting against the actual machine itself, because obviously we can see projections and we can hear the noise and we can see what their fears are, but I guess it's rather like if you're acting against green screen or something like that, you have to kind of pretend there's something going on. I know that the actors, particularly at this time, were known for their kind of corpsing and for laughing and joking and stuff. I mean, was that kind of taken...
I should say, no. But all
We used to mess about in rehearsals a lot.
Yeah.
We used to play
we
about
were
in
naughty in
rehearsals.
But once the camera was on,
On screen, they were pretty
Well, you
good.
had to, because, I mean, there was no time to mess around. I mean,
No,
you know,
absolutely.
once 10 o'clock came, bang, that's it. So, and with all those special effects and all those things having to go on, we couldn't afford to waste anybody's time by being really silly.
The only person who was late was Nick.
Yes.
He lived up in Muswell Hill, and one of his excuses one morning was snow on Muswell Hill.
And it became
Yes,
So we used to, after that, every time we saw, Nick, you late? Snow on Muswell Hill.
yes, where the conditions in
Where the
Muswell
conditions
Hill were very
wonder.
changeable. But with the green screen thing and the blue screen, we started out as it was then, you know, with green, and we were experimenting back then, because I remember when we did something on this planet and they were still fiddling around trying to find out which one actually worked best. And for me it was really hard, because you had the monitor, which is what you would watch, but I couldn't see the monitor without my glasses. So I actually got to work all of those things, and it had to be literally done in my head, and it all had to sort of pan out. But do you remember we tried green, we tried yellow,
Barry was very keen on experimenting.
He was.
he was
We tried to
constantly
decide
putting me
around.
in front of a different colour and saying, no, that's not working.
It used to be blue and they went to green, was it, Tim?
Blue, yes. There's one CSO scene. Did you see it?
That CSO, colour separation overlay, was brilliant, darling.
Wouldn't know.
You wouldn't have known.
Yeah.
I think the great thing, though, with all these special effects is when you don't have them, you've got to rely very much more on the writing and on the story. And the danger, I think, of having £1 million budget and all being able to do absolutely any kind of explosion you want is I don't say it happens, but you could forget that actually the most important thing is the writing.
Yeah.
I wonder if we just talk a moment about Roger Delgado, who we just touched on a moment ago. Obviously, there was it was always, I think, expected there was going to be like a final story, which obviously never happened in the end. That was being written because he was going to leave at a certain point. But everybody,
So he said.
or so he says, right? Well, but everybody seems to talk so favourably about him. And I wonder if you talk about both him, but also the role, because the Master is such a kind of a uniquely English kind of creation. I mean, the fact that he has his own phone in his TARDIS and he rings up the Doctor just to kind of sort of say farewell,
And smokes a cigar. Wasn't that wonderful?
and they're so polite, and they're so polite to each other, and sort of between, you know, sort of these deadly enemies, prepared to, you know, he would happily kill the Doctor by all accounts, but oh right, old chap, let's go and do this. I mean, what if you just tell us about Roger and about the role of the Master and how that evolved?
Well, I think, yeah, there was always some sort of good feeling between them, and somewhere or other we planted they've been great friends at the Academy until, you know, the Master went to the sort of path of evil. I mean, I think Roger was absolutely wonderful, you know, he's incredibly good. It was great to see him there. But the problem not with Roger, there was no problem with Roger. I mean, Roger, like everybody who like many actors who play evil characters, was the nicest man you can meet. It's the heroes who give you trouble, you know, the good guys and, well, whatever. But, the trouble was that we came up with this idea of the Master, Barry and I, well, me actually, because we were talking in the BBC bar about the Doctor is like Sherlock Holmes, and I suddenly thought he needs a Moriarty. And Barry said, right, and I know just who's going to play him. So it was always going to be Roger. Nobody else was even thought of. So that was fine. He was a great success. But then in story terms, if the villain in every story in every season is the Master, you somewhat lose the element of surprise, to say the least. And so what we did, we didn't want to lose him, of course, so what we did was have him go away and pop up occasionally, and you could perhaps try and bring him in. You know, you'd learn that the Galactic Ambassador was coming to sort everything out, and when he arrived it was the Master, that kind of thing. But Roger said to Barry, you know, look, people are offering me work, or rather people are not offering me work because they think I'm tied up with Doctor Who. And some of the time I am, and some of the time I'm not. I think, you know, regretfully, I would sooner go, you know, make a clean break and go. So we were never more than at very early discussion stages about giving him a... We said, you know, do you want to fade away or do you want to be killed off? And he said, oh no, kill me off, he said, you know. So we were going to have a final story in which the Master and the Doctor had to cooperate on some great scheme, and the Master sacrifices himself to save the Doctor, you know. But then, of course, there was the, you know, the tragic ending of his accident, you know, so it all got cut off very sadly. But he was brilliant, Roger, wasn't he? Wasn't he wonderful?
It was lovely because they were sort of a match for each other. You know, they sort of played verbal
Yeah, there are not many
chess.
people who can hold a screen with Pertwee, is there?
No,
That's absolutely true, and Roger could, you know.
It was lovely, that laughing scene in that, where
Yeah.
you see
Yeah,
John standing up there
Yeah.
doing it. It's wonderful. Did he love doing that?
And I mean, and the other person who's not with us, but who absolutely we should celebrate today is Barry Letts, of course. And in fact, I know, John, you did a piece on your website about him. And I mean, is there anything you'd like to say about Barry?
Well, sometimes when you say too many nice things about people, it sounds a little bit sort of silly and a bit false. But Barry, although Christianity never kind of entered my life at that time, but Barry made religion sound decent. He made everything seem right, and he was very
Buddhist.
Very Buddhist. And
Buddhist.
because of my fear of acting. And I remember when I first met my agent, I said, I'm John Levene, you know, I'm an actor. He said, don't worry, John, your secret's safe with me. All I know is that he and John were just so helpful, and Katy, you know, they all came to help me, but there's always going to be a nervous person in the cast. It just happened to be me.
I had
But
no more experience than you. How
well,
can I help
yeah,
you?
yeah, but you were good, sweetheart. But at the end, they all came to help me, and I think I returned the favor by being pretty good myself.
Thing about Barry is I never ever met anybody who didn't like him.
No.
You know, if you mention to somebody, I know Barry Letts, so I'm working with Barry Letts, and they will say, yes, oh, Barry, what a nice chap he is, you know, and nobody ever had an unkind word to say for him.
He was very
And yeah, he was a good producer. He was a good producer. He never wanted to be a producer. Barry always wanted to be a director. That was his great love, and he got shunted into directing by the BBC. I always say that being a producer is like the quest for immortality in the Five Doctors. If you want it, that's proof you shouldn't have it. And if you want to be a producer, that's a disqualification. You shouldn't. Barry never wanted to be a producer. I never wanted to be a producer, you know, because there is really just too much power, which is very easy to abuse. But Barry was, you know, always extremely nice. So what is interesting, actually, is he changed character. Later on, we worked together on the classic serial, and for a while, I was his producer. And he changed character when he was a director. He was very tense and difficult when he was a director, but directors are like that, you know. Yeah. And he was under great strain. But, you know, what can I say? He was my best friend for 30 years, you know, my colleague and my best friend. And I still think every now and again about, Barry would enjoy that, I'll tell that to Barry. And it's always a shock, you know, when I realise I'm quite indignant about it, actually. He shouldn't have gone off like that, you know. But I miss him a great deal.
He's gone to direct, darling. It's all right.
Katy, you left after really quite a long innings in Doctor Who terms, and you left with the story of the Green Death. And I wonder if you could tell us about that, sort of the decision to leave and why that was the right point.
I've always looked at it this way. I mean, just from my point of view, I think, you know, when you watch something like Doctor Who, once you get to know a character very, very well, you know kind of how they're going to react in a situation. And I think for a show like that, it's very important for the Doctor to have someone else around so that he will then react in a different way, rather than kind of knowing where this couple are going. Because after sort of 3 years, you kind of see how she's going to react and how he will react with her. So I think to keep something like this really alive and different, you need to change probably the I don't know what to call her now. Everybody's got new names for it. The offsider, the companion, the, you know, Doctor Who girl. I think she needs to change so that the Doctor can slightly change his game. That's just my feeling on it, and I think
it's one of the things about Who is, you know, every story is a little bit different from every other story. You know, if you've got any sense, you don't follow a space invasion with a space invasion, or that was one of the reasons we had eventually to lose Unit, because if every story is a Unit story, you know, then it's difficult to keep it fresh. But every story should be a little different. Every companion, every new companion, every change of companion gives the show a little lift and a bit of intrigue and difference. And of course, there's a tremendous change, you know, every time you get a new Doctor. That's a huge change. A sort
you
of
can't change them as often as the companions, can you?
Yep, yep.
You know, really.
And how was so during that last season when Katy had gone, obviously Roger had gone, and I think at that point you and Barry had talked about leaving or had decided to leave.
Can I give what I believe is the accurate version?
Yeah, no, please do.
It was Jon first. It all originated with Jon, who one day came to us and said, "Look, you know, this is going to be a bit of a shock, but I want to leave." He said, "People are offering me work. You know, I'm being offered a play in the West End. I'm being offered a film, and I have to turn them down because I'm in Doctor Who. And if I keep on saying no, they're going to stop asking me. You know, so." Jon wanted to go after 5 years. Barry, as I say, had never really wanted to be a producer, wanted to get back to directing. And I didn't particularly want to go, actually. I was quite happy, but I thought, well, if they're going, I'm going. I'm not going to stay on as a spare part and a survivor of the old regime. It would be awkward for everybody. So we all went together, but it started with Jon. It really started with Jon.
It was his first opportunity in Jon's career, really, to be a straight actor, which he, you know, he was such a good actor, but he'd never really had the opportunity to play this kind of drama before. He was he took it very, very seriously. And I think having had a taste of it, was a bit like me. It was my second job after Man at the Top, which was very, very kind of heavy drama. And you wanted to see what else you were able to do once you'd started to learn more about your craft and so on and so forth. So for Jon, naturally, to be able to then go on and see what would come next as now quite a well-known, very, very well-known actor, which he'd always, before he'd always really been a light entertainer.
Yeah, he'd been covered in whiskers and hair and makeup
now he was
whatever,
an actor. Plus, even back then, we used to talk about Wurzel. Wurzel was something that was always lurking in the back of his mind. But he did want to pursue and see what else being a straight actor was going to bring him.
He almost, you know, left it too long. I mean, Who is a trap for an actor, you see? I mean, years ago, Rupert Davies, who played Maigret. When Maigret came to an end, he practically never got another job because he was always Maigret. Jon had, I think, quite a hard time initially when he left until he got... he was on a crime show, wasn't he? A quiz show?
Yeah, Whodunit.
Whodunit, yeah. And then he got Wurzel Gummidge away, and then, of course, that sort of launched him again. Tom, who did it for even longer, had, you know, a pretty tough time when he came out, and it took him quite a while to sort of
He'd also been an
himself.
actor of that, a dramatic actor prior to that. So for him, you know, it was a bit like Patrick Troughton, who, you know...
Now, so Patrick, you see, so
wonderful.
Patrick had it all completely sussed. Patrick was a well-known, well-respected character actor before he played Doctor Who. He played him for 3 years, 3 years, came out and became a well-known, respected character actor again. I don't think his career ever hiccuped, you know. He got it absolutely sorted, but it is a trap, a lead like that, you know.
But anything like this, some people, I was just going to say, but anything like this, you know, some people will come out and their careers will go on. Some people will come out and they'll get stuck. It's called showbiz. I mean, it's how it is. And it really is. It's luck and being at the right place, the right time, and the right things being offered, and you taking the right things. And some will go on and some get stuck. You know, you see it in many series and soap operas and things like that. Some will go onward and some won't.
I'm going to open up...
Things you're saying about being serious. I mean, I remember we did take it very, very seriously. And I mean, in order to make the thing work, You really had to believe in what you were doing.
in what you're
and you
doing.
had to play it for real.
Sending it up is fatal.
Couldn't possibly. But one of the things I thought that came across awfully well in Mind of Evil was the humour. You can play it seriously and the humour written in was fantastic. I know there was some sort of time-lapse laughs that we got this afternoon, which was nice.
Secret Tunnel went down well.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, very well. Very good.
Tim, do you remember though we did laugh with Neil McCarthy when because he used to wander around and we all used to follow him going, Dr. Summers, Dr. Summers. It became the thing.
Actually, Neil is my first film memory, and I shall never get it out of myself. I must go to sort of a psychiatrist or something. It was popping out from behind the tombstone in David Copperfield.
Oh, yes.
I mean, he scared the life out of me then, and I dream
Wonderful
about it
face.
still. Terrible
You do
trauma.
need help.
Yes.
Wonderful face.
Yes, incredible.
I worked with Neil McCarthy on Great Expectations.
Oh, did you?
And he played Joe Garrity, and he was a brilliant Joe Garrity. I didn't direct Great Expectations, Alan Bridges did.
But you thought of him, didn't you, Tim? I believe you suggested him that he was exactly the one for that
Yeah,
part.
absolutely right for it.
Before we open up to see if there are any audience questions, I just want to say from Richard and John's point of view, at the point where you kind of left the show as well, did you know that was, I mean, obviously I know you had the situation where you'd kind of had been sort of, I suppose, notionally disgraced and then brought back in on Planet of the Spiders. But did you both know that your time was up in that respect and that you'd be moving on?
Well, I sort of moved on for other reasons because I was doing another job up in the north of England, directing a youth theatre. And I actually, as far as I remember, I was offered quite a few other scenes and things which I couldn't do because, so that's why it sort of tailed out. But the story that I heard, I don't know whether this is true, that I was going to be blown up actually.
Oh, I never had a plan to
You
blow
didn't hear
that. No,
Maybe you're innocent of that then. But the story I heard was that dear Barry, as he always did, came to my rescue. And I had that, of course, wonderful story in Invasion of the Dinosaurs, which that's an amazing story, actually, and a very great opportunity for me. Though I'm surprised how many people say to me, Richard, what was it like being a traitor? I never was. And if you watch that story
you were sincere but deluded, as it were.
deluded. Well, I've been deluded all my life, but I can't help that. But actually, in the Invasion of the Dinosaurs, there's a very clear scene when I say, "No, I'm sorry, I'm not going to kill the Doctor."
Yeah, it's true. No, it was
I'm glad we put that to right.
It was a matter, I think, in story terms, of wanting to give it a twist. And we thought, what can we do that will absolutely shock them? Yeah. And we thought we'll have Captain Yates go bad, go over to the other side at least, have a good intention. And that was that went down well. And then later on, when we wanted, I remember talking to Barry to how he was going to get a link into the what was your final story?
Final one was the
spiders. Yeah,
Planet of the Spiders, and. I said, there's Captain Yates, let's bring him back, so we could, well, there you are. But, it's a twist again, you see.
Yeah. What about you, John? Did you know it was kind of coming to an end?
No, I did not. I know I was the last one there, and I really felt lonely with Katy, John, Richard, and Nick. Nick was Nick still with me when Tom Baker took over? Yes, he was.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, of course he was. And I mean, the whole reason, somebody asked me the other day how I ended up getting in show business, and I have to be honest and tell you that it was because my mother was a ventriloquist. And the funny thing is...
It was really her behind you all the time.
No, yeah. Thank you, Terrance. The oddest thing about it was, for 14 years, I thought it was the dog telling me to kill my father. No, I felt really lonely, and I didn't enjoy the last bit at all. But that's just,
Leaving anything is very painful.
It's always hard.
But, it's also wonderful
That
having
last Green Death, the Green Death was, we all genuinely cried.
But it's also, you have that for the rest of your life, this wonderful memory, these wonderful stories, doing things that we're doing now, which, let's face it, we didn't really know was going to happen back then, to the extent that it is now. This is one, but as actors, we've all wanted to move on, see what else we could do, stand on the edge of that cliff and just jump, But how lovely that we've done something that brings us all back together. I call it the Doctor Who kiss. That, you know, once you've had a little taste, and you've been in it, an actor or a technician or whatever it is, you know, we're part of this extraordinary thing.
And also,
we're lucky.
It's not just the technicians and the writers and the actors and everybody else. It's this lot as well. I mean, once you have the Doctor Who kiss, once you get the Doctor Who kiss, you're hooked as well.
But that's all part of the Doctor Who kiss.
It is extraordinary. I mean, I stopped making the show, working on the show full time in 1974, before most of you were born, probably. And
yes,
here you all are.
No, of course we were. Looking out, I wouldn't say that, Terrance, actually.